Janet Mock has a remarkable life story. Janet was born a boy, and at the age of 18, she took the extraordinary step to become the woman that she is today. But Janet went even further in 2011, revealing her secret to the world in a profile in Marie Claire magazine. Janet's now a fierce advocate for the transgender community and is telling her story in the new memoir, Redefining Realness, My Path to Womanhood, Identity, Love, and so much more. And Janet Mock joins me now exclusively. How are you, Janet?
Very good.
So this is the amazing thing about you. Had I not known anything about your story, I would have had absolutely not a clue that you had ever been a boy, a male. Mm-hmm. Which makes me absolutely believe you should always have been a woman. And that must have been what you felt when you were young. Take me back to when you first thought, this is not right. I'm not Charles, which was the name you were given when you were born in Hawaii. I'm a woman. I'm a girl.
I think for me, it was just, I always knew that I was me. I didn't know that it was about gender or that it was about anything other than just the inclinations that I just kind of naturally had, the things that I was drawn to.
At what point did you change your name?
I think for me, it was a series of little bitty steps, which I do detail in the book. But for me, there was never any turning back. It was always moving forward.
When you began wearing the girls' clothes at school, was that when you began calling yourself Janet, or was it after you had the operation when you were 18?
It was way before that.
Here you go. It takes a lot of courage, this. You're going through school. You've gone from Charles to Janet, from boys' clothes to girls' clothes. And you've coped with all the teasing and the bullying, and you've come through, and it's made you, I guess, strong in your head enough to say, I'm going to go through properly with this and become a woman. I'm going to have a transgender operation, which is a huge thing to do at 18. Tell me how you felt when you actually were approaching the operation.
Well, that was a big step in a long journey, right? It took 18 years to come to that journey, and it may seem very young to a lot of people, but for me, those matters were very urgent, and they were also a very long process. And so for me, it was a step for me to move closer to me. It was a reconciliation with myself. It was kind of a stamp of personal approval of my own womanhood.
When you had told these men the news, did some of them run a mile? Did others surprise you by being very supportive? I mean, how did men react?
They were all very mixed. I think disclosure is frightening for anyone that's telling anyone about their past. And for me, I think that the through line there is that we're all looking for someone to love us for fully who we are, not despite of ourselves, but because of ourselves. And for me, I was incredibly lucky that I found someone that wanted to just love me. And also, he's lucky to also be with me. And that's something that must be also stated.
You're seeing issues like gay marriage in particular moving very fast in America, faster than many people imagined was possible. What does that tell you about modern America and its ability perhaps to become much more accepting and tolerant than it may have been even 20 years ago?
I think that movement has been going on for a very long time. I think that it's a product of much hard work and movement and organizing. It's been going on since the 1960s. And trans people were also very much a part of that movement. I think of Sylvia Rivera, Marsha P. Johnson, Miss Major Griffin Gracie. These trans women were also on the streets there fighting for their lives that night. And so for me, I think that America is about self-determination and exceptionalism and exerting who your identity is in a world that hopefully becomes more and more safe to express yourself and be very open about who you are.
So Janet, I've got you back on the show because cards on the table. I have spent an infuriating 24 hours and I want you to explain why I've had to go through this, because let me start from this premise. I have always been 100% supportive of all gay rights, gay marriage rights, transgender rights. In fact, I want equality for everyone in America and around the world. That's always been my position. Anyone who's watched this show knows that's exactly what I've always stood for. I had you on the show. You had read a powerful book. I did nothing but laud your courage. I said you were a fantastic person to be out there, center stage, selling the message that there's no need to stigmatize transgender people. I called you a woman throughout the interview. I never disputed the fact that you're a woman. And yet today, I have spent literally 12 hours being viciously abused by the transgender community, egged on by your own tweeting last night that you were somehow very dismayed by the way the interview had gone. Now, I was surprised because you never said anything during the interview to indicate you were remotely dismayed with any of the terminology I was using. At the end of the interview, you were very cordial. We shook hands. You thanked me for the interview. And off you went. And the interview was done 5 days ago. So I ask you, Janet Mock, to explain to me why you didn't say anything during the interview, why you seemed quite happy with it afterwards, why you then felt the need to tweet quite hostile tweets in my direction, which then sparked this furore amongst the transgender community, because I feel pretty peeved about it.
Well, I'm sorry that you feel offended. I think that people in the trans community feel equally as offended. I think that one of the #1 things with trans women specifically is that so much of our lives are open to dissection and illegitimacy and investigation, and we're constantly questioned ever since we're very young that who we are is incorrect, wrong, and should be kept secret. And I think that being someone that is very visible in a stigmatized community. You know, I am a trans woman of color. I'm a young woman, and these are issues that I think that we need to give trans people space to tell their own stories. And we should follow the lead of people who are out there and being visible and actually advocating for these rights. Before commercial break, we had a lovely conversation, and then all of a sudden you said, who was formerly a man. I was a baby. I was assigned male gender because of the appearance of my genitals. As I grew up, I discovered my girlhood, I discovered my womanhood, and I proclaimed and defined myself for myself, as Audre Lorde says. If we do not define ourselves...
Why didn't you correct me at the time? Why didn't you correct me?
I did not because I was scared.
If you felt that strongly.
I did not because I was scared. And I wanted to be a cordial guest. And I think that that was probably incorrect of me. I wanted to be kind, I wanted to be generous because I was appreciative of having 2 segments on a mainstream show. It was my first major appearance as a young trans woman who wrote her first
And I thought
book.
you were terrific, by the way. For
and
what
I thought it was a terrific
you
exchange too. I think that
by the way,
I love
by
that
the
you
way,
called
Janet,
me that I looked like Beyonce, that you said all of these amazing things, and that was great. But I think that also being offensive and being kind are not mutually exclusive things. I think that we can be have great intentions and be good people, but also be ignorant and have a lack of understanding about these issues. And a lot of these things, especially for trans women, are about understanding.
Right, okay,
it's about understanding. And
Janet,
intention is great, but we also need action.
Okay. Let me cut to the quick about why perhaps confusion has arisen, not just in my mind, but in many people's minds. You are famous in America now, predominantly from a piece you wrote for Marie Claire magazine in 2011.
I actually did not write that piece. I didn't write that piece.
Well, it's in your words. It's a first-person piece by you.
I didn't choose the title, just like I did not choose a title on the title cards that were underneath my name in the segment, or the tweets that went out from the show. I actually did not write that piece, Piers. I also wrote a follow-up piece, an essay critiquing that, just like I critiqued this episode.
I read that.
And in the book, I also, in my introduction of my book, I talk about how that piece was so problematic. And it's problematic because we don't let trans women say who they are. That piece should not have been the basis of our interview, though, Piers. I wrote the record of my life. I wrote it. It took me 3 years to write that. It took me years to be the first person in my family to go to college, to be able to have access to those resources and to write this book and to live my life. And my entire life, I've been told that who I am is wrong and should be kept silent. And so for me, that Marie Claire piece is not the basis of my life.
I want to learn why it is so offensive to actually just say that you grew up as a boy and you then, because you've always felt that you were female, you had surgery to become a woman, to become a real woman, as you say in the book. Why is it offensive?
I think that we need to have a discussion about what gender is and gender expectations in our culture. I think that we are born and we're assigned a sex at birth. That is a matter none of us have control over, but we do have control over our destinies and over our identities, and we should be respected. It's not about the past. It's not about what surgeries I may or may not have had. It's not about how I disclose my gender to people. It's about who I am right now. I'm Janet Mock. I'm author of Redefining Realness, and I'm a fierce trans advocate. And I will continue to be exactly that. That's what I was on this show to do. If I spoke out every single time that someone called me out of my name or labeled me as something that I'm not, I would not have time to advocate for the fierce and urgent issues in my community, issues of poverty and joblessness, of a lack of health care, of violence, verbal and physical violence against trans women.
I don't see that as being wrong, that you were born a boy and felt you were a woman and are now a woman. I don't feel that anything of that is wrong. and I don't think the terminology is offensive.
It further showed other people in my community that if Janet Mock can be misgendered, if she can be labeled something that she is not, then what does that mean for me?